Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited for our conversation that we're going to be having with Dr. Neha Pathak. Dr. Pathak is a medical professional. She's the chief physician editor for health and lifestyle medicine at WebMD. She's also dual board certified in internal medicine and lifestyle medicine with a focus on diet, exercise, and stress management strategies to maintain health and well-being. She's a graduate of Harvard and Cornell and holds a certificate in climate change and health communication from the Yale School of Public Health. If that wasn't enough, she also sits on the board for an organization called Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. And she also sits on the board for Bhumi Global, which is great. And I think the most important thing to know about Neha is that she was born and raised in England, like myself. So Neha, thanks for being with us. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. And you do so much. And I really just want to jump right into it because, you have a background in medicine, like many people from a South Asian, Indian or Hindu background. You have a great career in medicine, Harvard, Cornell. You couldn't ask for better than that. But it seems at some point your career took a bit of a shift and you went into climate change. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got into medicine, but then more importantly, what got your interest in doing climate change work specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think medicine, I would say, was not necessarily in my family history. It was something that my parents always sort of thought of as a nice, stable career when we moved to the States. And they sort of encouraged that. But when I went to college, I was sort of gung-ho on being a teacher. And I really was very interested in maybe going into an inner city school and doing sort of Teach for America and things like that. And then as I thought more about my own skill set and what I felt really comfortable doing, teaching in a one-on-one setting with patients just became something that I felt really comfortable with doing and something I was very passionate about. And then as I started seeing patients and kind of looking at the history and going further and further upstream to what was causing people's problems in the first place, it always came back to lifestyle issues and also environmental issues. So things people were exposed to, lack of access to clean air, clean water. It just sort of, as a primary care doctor, you always go to prevention first. And I can't do much once you've got the disease besides give you pills, but I can really talk to you about how to prevent things from happening. And really, ultimately, that all goes back to what we're eating, what we're breathing, and what we're drinking. So I sort of pivoted to medical journalism and started thinking about how to talk to and communicate with a larger audience, not just one-on-one in the office setting, but how to do this on a larger scale. So that's really the shift in career and the focus on climate change and biodiversity loss as some of the biggest things that are impacting our health today.
And can you elaborate on that a bit more? Because I think a lot of people don't know or maybe aren't clear on the connection between climate change and biodiversity and the impact on our human health. We may think of zoonotics and COVID-19 as like an extreme example of that. But how does that show up maybe like in our day-to-day lives, in our communities, in our towns and cities?
Yeah, I think that for me, it was really seeing it show up in my children, which really first got me to realize that this was something that was happening right now and affecting our children's health right now. So very simple, easy example. All of us anywhere we live can look at our region and think about the environment that we are generally exposed to. So I live in Southeast United States in Atlanta, where we have very hot summers. And especially around the time of COVID, when the kids were pulled out of school, they were pulled out of their social situations. When schools finally opened up, it was in the heat of summer. And now I had to let them go back to see their friends. And I was worried about them going outside for recess or going to play soccer because the high temperatures were really, really dangerous for health. High temperatures also make it very likely to have worse air quality. So that can worsen in terms of when you're breathing in air, it can help you, it can allow you to bring in more toxic gases like ozone that damage your lungs over the long run. And so when I was letting my kids go to school, I was worried that they would be exposed to these other elements because of the change in our weather patterns. The other thing is my daughters have horrible hay fever. They have very, very, very bad seasonal allergies. And we know with climate change, these problems are going to affect them for longer periods of time. So the allergists down here used to say, hey, start thinking about taking your allergy pills early, starting in March to prevent really bad allergy symptoms. Now we're telling people start taking these pills in February.
Oh, wow.
So I have young children. What is that going to look like over the course of the next 20, 30 years when they're taking these medicines for longer and longer periods? So that's really what brought it home to me and what I try to share with my patients.
And what other kind of health issues are you seeing in the medical community with increased global temperatures? I'm sure you're across looking at data from other parts of the world, not just here in the United States. What are the trends over the last number of years that you have access to see what's actually happening to people's health because of rising temperatures globally?
Yeah, so in terms of higher temperatures, so when we think about higher temperatures, we're also thinking about really more intense temperatures, and we're thinking about these temperatures lasting for longer periods of time. So if you think about your own self, when it's warm outside, it becomes more and more difficult to concentrate on things. When you're overheated, we know the studies show that people have less tolerance to cognitive dysfunction. People have less tolerance to be able to learn new things. So that has a lot of impacts on people that are working outdoors. So globally, we know that a lot of people spend a lot of their time outdoors, whether that's farming, whether that's in construction, whether that's doing all sorts of outdoor labor. And we know that being exposed to that for longer and longer periods of time without cessation can impact people's kidneys. It can impact people's mental health. It can cause worsening of heart disease. So really across the globe, we're seeing people have, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is the only thing you have to worry about is heat at the time that you're exposed to it, right? But what is actually true is that when you're exposed to heat for long periods of time, you're getting little hits to your kidneys. Your kidneys are just not able to function as much because you're more dehydrated. So all of this can cause consequences over a long term. And it's not just that moment that the temperatures are too high that are affecting you. It's the long and the length of the high temperatures that can cause impacts over the course of your lifetime.
And I want to ask you a question, an interesting question. I had a personal experience with this past summer, because as you may remember, in England, there were record temperatures in England over the summer. And I remember talking to my parents and I was thinking, they don't have air conditioning in England, and they're not used to these high temperatures. And here in America, here on the East Coast, we have a summer of high temperatures and we're used to managing that, with air conditioning and so on. And then I asked my parents, I said, what are you doing? How are you able to sleep at night with these temperatures? And my parents are like, we're fine. We don't need air conditioning. We don't have any fans on in our bedroom. We're like, it doesn't bother us. And it really got me thinking, there's also like is there a generational issue here as well? Because, I know my parents and people of that generation who were born and raised whether in India or other like hotter climates, they think they can just adapt and just cope with the heat. And I was really worried for their health for a few weeks, actually, when they were like, no, we're totally fine. So going to your, your certificate in climate change, communication and health, how do we talk to people about this, whether it's our parents or peers or children? Because it's almost like it's a silent thing. We don't really acknowledge it or we don't know it's there. But as you're saying, over a prolonged period, it can really impact our health. So how can we tell or encourage other people to take these concerns seriously?
Yeah, so I live in a COVID has changed my life in a lot of ways, but one is it's turned my family into an intergenerational family. So I'm also living with my 86-year-old dad who grew up mostly in India, and even being in the UK for 20 years didn't change. He keeps the thermostat on 80 degrees. I mean, it doesn't matter what time of year it is, we are just living at 80 degrees. So here during the same time that was happening in the UK, in Atlanta, we also had higher than average temperatures, and we lost our air conditioning for
Oh,
3
wow.
weeks.
Hmm.
And my husband, the children, we were all going bananas. I mean, this was in real time experiencing these effects of higher temperatures than your body is sort of acclimatized to.
Yeah.
So we could certainly see in my behavior, in my husband's behavior, the children, higher levels of stress, very, very high, increased difficulty in going to sleep, in staying asleep.
Right.
My dad, who is 86 with a history of heart disease, I mean, this did not affect him in the least. And so I think, what's important to realize is that we are globally acclimatized to different temperatures in different places. So that is true.
Right.
What we need to recognize, though, is that climate change is a problem of change, right? So it's not that we become climate static at a new set temperature. This is going to continue to change according to all of the climate models, and to continue to get more intense, longer periods, and more frequent. So with that realization, what the conversation I had with my dad too is that at a certain point, we all human beings reach a certain temperature beyond which we cannot acclimatize. So though we may be okay today, certainly we may not be okay in a decade from now, or in 2 decades from now. So I think that it's really important for them to think about their grandchildren. That's how I talk to my dad.
Right.
They're not going to be used to living at 80 degrees inside. I mean, again, and then there's the whole issues about sustainability. If you're, maxing out your thermostat to cool, or he's, bumping it up to heat, you're at high risk for blackouts and brownouts. So when all the air conditioning goes out and you're used to it, now how do you survive in that situation?
Yeah. And I love how you lifted up there one word, which is stress, right? And I've recently been doing some research into the importance of good sleep, and how that in modern times, let's say, like, we don't place so much emphasis on getting good sleep. And I think what you were just saying, just like, the increased heat means that we can't sleep properly, so stress levels go up. And we know in other parts of the world, internal displacement and conflict actually arises through climate change, because increasing temperatures mean food can't grow and so on like that. So really connecting all these dots, I think, is so important. And I love how you're doing that, both talking about it, but also in your day-to-day work. And I'm wondering, how do you balance everything that you do? I really want to get into like what you're doing with Georgia Interfaith Power and Light and Bhumi, but you have a lot of competing, it seems like, a lot of competing responsibilities, both personally and professionally and otherwise. How do you maintain that balance? How do you maintain not getting too stressed and burning out from all the different things that you're involved in? Because I think a lot of people want to do more, but they don't know how to maintain that balance. And so that's why they may be concerned about climate change, but don't know where to start. So how do you maintain that balance, and where could people start thinking about how they could get more involved in this kind of work?
It's really hard. I think this is a moment to lift up the fact that the reality of the real talk is that this is hard, in terms of balancing what skill sets I want to teach my children, right? Sometimes we're so fixated on the day-to-day, like, oh, do you have friends, and how are you doing on, your schoolwork, and did you make that A, and did you not? And it's hard with that competing interest, that day-to-day interest, to then think about the longer term, which is, are you going to be in a safe environment in 10 years? What are the jobs of the future even going to look like? Are you going to be prepared for that? Are you going to be emotionally prepared for loss and grief, potentially, of losing a place or a space or a way of life that you're used to right now? So it's hard as a parent, I think, to think about what are the best things to be teaching your children to build resilience. It's hard as a physician that's really invested in primary care and primary prevention, to work in a space where people are, the reality is mostly thinking about the here and now, and no fault to them at all. But if you have high blood pressure now, or you can't pay your bills now, it's really hard to get people to think about the longer term consequences. So I just want to sort of acknowledge that reality. And I think that in terms of the balance, a lot of it comes from focusing on Hinduism for me. I mean, it really does focus on, we've talked about this before. I don't really call ourselves people of faith. I call ourselves people of action. And I really believe that. I think fundamental to our whole system of thought is that you've got to get up and you've got to act, and try to make that act something that brings something positive to this universe versus something that brings something negative. And so I think that's really what I wake up with every morning, is just, this is a sacred place that we live in. This is it's a sacred duty to raise your children or to care for your loved ones. And so whatever work, whether it's big or small, that does something beneficial, that's all you can hope for. So that's really what I try to do.
That's great. And an excellent segue, because I was just going to get to the Hinduism part of this, because as you were talking about these essentially existential issues that you're trying to teach your children or discuss with your children, in many ways they're spiritual or religious questions, right? In questions of meaning and purpose and of life and death, and and the story we tell ourselves about who we are and where we're going. And it is fascinating that you come from a medical background and you've gone into the climate change space, but you've gone somewhat very specifically into religious, or what we call faith-based climate change work. Before we get into, I'd love to hear a bit more about what of your Hinduism really inspires you. But you're on the board for this organization called Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, in addition to being on the board for Bhumi Global. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Georgia Interfaith Power and Light is, and what attracted you to join that board and work with that particular organization?
I consider myself so lucky and so privileged to work with the Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. I think that was my first exposure to working in the nonprofit space. And it was really through learning more about how to talk about climate change and its impacts on health. And that's how I became sort of involved in this organization. And so the work that they do is just amazing. It's really just grassroots level, working with faith communities to green their congregations, green their buildings, green their sacred spaces. A lot of these congregations will do waste audits through GIPL. They'll do power energy audits. So it's really offering concrete things to congregations. And then beyond that, there's a lot of advocacy. So it's taking the power of all of these groups and saying, what is going to benefit these people in Georgia? And it's really policies that will clean our air, that will clean our water, and really focusing as an organization on trying to advocate for those policies at a state level. So just an amazing organization, and to be able to play a small role and try to sort of bring in some Sanatan Dharma voices is very much my privilege, but I've learned so much from them.
Wonderful. And tell us more about your Hinduism, your Sanatan Dharma. What from the tradition really, does it drive you? Does it push you? Does it pull you? What from the tradition really kind of animates you and gets you excited? And as you said, like gets you out of bed in the morning to be a person of action?
I think that from being an immigrant to any place and always feeling kind of maybe like tumbleweed, or like, sort of drifting in space and not really knowing where you belong. I think for my family, we were always rooted in at least Hinduism, and whatever space we were in, it was sacred. So the river that was flowing through our neighborhood in New Jersey, that reminded us of, the sacred rivers back home. My parents would always, whenever we saw that, it would be whatever name of that river, Mata Ki Jai, like always, like that would be a sacred space for us. And that was connecting us to, through time and space, to something that was part of my roots. And I think that helped ground me. So I think all of that. Well, and then when you woke up in the morning, my parents were adamant, like, do not take a step until you acknowledge Bhumi, so they were that was like a very foundational, and all of that was very much acknowledging that the world around us is sacred. Every single thing that they taught me, whether they did it knowingly or unknowingly, was really just in my essence, was just to understand this world that we live in as sacred. So I think that is number one, how Sanatan Dharma sort of plays a role, is just to acknowledge the sacred in everything around us. My dad and a lot of people said, we don't think that there's only one God, we think that there is only God. And so I think that has really been a driving principle for me. And then that if that is true, then every action we take has to be in honoring that sacred around us. And so my dad always, that was the other thing. Don't take a step before you wake up. And also, the only thing that you have a right to do in this world is to work. You have no rights to the fruit of your action, right? A very fundamental Hindu principle. So whatever will be, but as long as you're acting in some way, then you have purpose and you have meaning. And that's what you've got to do. That's what every day is about.
You said it, that's what you got to do, for sure. And how does this play into, going back to your work with Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, because that's an interfaith organization. How is your Hinduism interconnected with doing interfaith work? Because I think, we could do this. Bhumi Global does this work through a Hindu lens, but we also work with other faith partners globally. And you started out by doing this work through an interfaith context. So I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about how your Hinduism shows up and the importance of showing up as a Hindu in an interfaith space.
It's so bidirectional. So I think it's amazing to be part of a tradition. Like Sanatan Dharma does not mean any religion, right? It's just universal rules or universal principles. So I think that from that lens, it was really a natural step to work with an interfaith group, because all of these philosophies, anything that's good transcends religion. There's not any religion that has a monopoly on what's good. So I think that was very natural to work with an interfaith group. But I think what was really learning a lesson for me was that a lot of faiths are very open to speaking from the heart and speaking from the lens of their religious tradition. Not making any bones about it, because there is a morality that comes from that space. There is sort of a way of building community around those traditions. There's a shorthand, right? So you can say things in a way that the Christian community will understand. You can say things in a way that the Jewish community will understand and sort of rise together around. Same thing with Islam. And I think that for us as followers of Sanatan Dharma and Hinduism, I think it's really important to learn that too, that there are ways that we can say things and share things that's a shorthand that we can rouse people to the same. We all understand that, or we've all sort of been taught that this is a river goddess, or this is, Mother Earth, and that doing good karma is the goal of our lives, and to achieve, a sort of freedom in a way that is authentic. Sat Chit Anand is sort of the essence of our goal, is the
Right.
essence of what we're trying to do. So I think leaning into that and using that as a moral basis for the work we do is crucial. And
Yeah.
and we're not alone. We're all working together to reach the same aims. So I think that that's what I've learned from working with this group.
Yeah, I love that. And for myself, when I've been like yourself, been doing this work for a few years now, and I've found that over the years, my religious and spiritual life, my Hindu life, has been nourished so much more and really grown in ways that I never really thought would happen by working in interfaith spaces. By seeing, like you're saying, Muslims and Jews and Buddhists and Sikhs and people of other spiritualities and traditions practicing their traditions, but also, as you said, talking confidently about how their tradition is applicable to the current concerns of the world. It really made me grow in ways which I really appreciate, which I think I may not have done if I hadn't been in those interfaith spaces. And I'm just wondering if you could share, how has your Hinduism, has your practice or your understanding of Hinduism changed as a result of being in those multi-faith spaces?
Yeah, I think that one, it's really allowed me to think about the connections between all of our shared values.
Right.
So to feel more comfortable speaking in that shared language that transcends one faith. I think for me growing up, it was always sort of a private thing. We did this at home. We have our home mandir. We do our prayers at home, and then we go out to the space, never to speak of it again. And I think learning from brothers and sisters in other faith traditions, it's that you can do both. And that's one thing that I'm like super proud of, is that my kids, it's not even as confused. They're just like, it's Diwali, we're going to go to school today in our Indian clothes, and we're going to tell everybody about Diwali, and I'm going to talk about Lakshmi Ma. And that's just, I don't, I don't understand. Why would I not do that? So I think that that's just something that I probably would not have, my children wouldn't have grown into that had I not been working in these spaces.
That's beautiful. That's nice. What's your, going to put you on the spot a little bit here, Neha. Do you have like a favorite story or a favorite text or passage or verse, or even like a favorite deity from Hinduism that you really take inspiration from or guidance from when it comes to any aspect of your work, whether it's your work as a healthcare professional or in climate change or as a mother? I find that's really important, that Hinduism is a very relatable tradition. There's something in there for everyone, right? And we all have our Ishtadevs, or the deity or the gods or the goddesses that we may find particular kind of resonance with. Where do you go for your inspiration within the canon, let's say, of Hinduism?
Oh gosh, I love them all. I love there's so many, but I will say, so from the philosophical point of view, I think the Karmanyavadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, that's a scripture in the Gita, which just basically means you got to do the work. We talked about the fruit of the work you have absolutely no right to. And I think that scripture is always in the back of my mind, going whenever I'm doing anything. Stories, I mean, I have 3 daughters, and it's Navratri season, so I am Durga Ma is just like, I'm all about her right now. But I think for me, the main thing, the way that we kind of share that story, we just did an interfaith garba for Navratri here in Georgia a few weeks ago, and I always get to say a little bit about Navratri. And so one of the things I talked about was the importance of the mother, right? So whenever that whole story is around a demon who is such a horrible, horrible bully that right now, when we draw pictures of him, he's got the head of a bull. And who do you go to when there is a bully in your life? The one person that is going to stand up for you is your mother. And that's the same. So it is the mother goddess. And I think the way that we think about her in our family, since I have the full set of three goddesses at my house with my three daughters, is that, you start off with the goddess of energy, Shakti Ma, Amba Ma, Durga Ma, and that is someone that is going to destroy destroy the evil, whether that's bad thoughts, bad deeds, whatever it is. That's the energy to get rid of the bad. Then you've got that second one, the second incarnation, which is Lakshmi. That's the good. So the prosperity. Now that you've gotten rid of the bad, you're filling yourself with the good, and your life, your house, your mind. And then the final stage is Saraswati, wisdom. And my youngest is named Vidya, which is now that you need the wisdom to be able to differentiate between the two going forward, when to get rid of the bad and when to fill yourself with the good. So I think that thinking of the goddess in that way helps me sort of move forward as a mother and encourage my three daughters to also move to good action.
That's fantastic. Tell me those again very quickly. The last one was knowledge. What was the first two again?
First is Durga, so Shakti Ma,
okay.
which is, and then the second is Lakshmi Ma. So prosperity, and then Saraswati Ma, the wisdom. So it's a way of pulling all three of the major goddesses together.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great framing for like how to engage with climate change work, right? It's like you need all those energies with you to, as you said, go out into the world and be a person of action. Neha, this has been really great talking with you. Is there anything else that you want to add before we close out for now?
This is a great conversation. Thank you so much. I'm truly impressed by everything you do on a daily basis. I would say that that's probably another thing that inspires me, is working with people like you and others. So I think, again, finding like-minded people to do this work with is just such a critical and crucial piece. I think of myself as a very tiny little piece out here floating around, but for having found amazing people who do such amazing work. So to be able to interact with you all and be inspired by you all is really my honor. So I encourage anyone else who wants to take action to look for that in their own spaces.
That's a beautiful note to end it on, Neha. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for your friendship and everything that we've done together over the last couple of years. I'm looking forward to many more years of working together. And as Neha said, if anyone is interested in this kind of work, please look at the Bhumi Global website. Please get in touch. We are building a movement, a Hindu movement for Mother Earth. Neha, it's been a pleasure talking with you today, and look forward to connecting with you soon. Take care.